And 1, 2, 3, testing, 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 1, 2, 3. That's the way my grandfather used to start all his tapes off. My grandfather was blind, and so it was a particularly special thing to sort of hear to get a tape from him. And I'd like to bring today a little bit more to this particular vid around just trying to understand how you get the soul, how do you get the personality into your figures. And that's sort of the topic I'm going to be talking about today. So let's see how it goes. Got everybody and just checking, got a slightly different setup this morning. So team, what I'm going to be talking about today is personality. I'm calling this one Flesh and Soul. Okay, for those that are watching it after we've played, you'll get the benefit of this earlier little preamble. I'm just waiting for a magic number to appear on how many are watching. Nice to see you, Anthony. Welcome on board, mate. Great to have you here. Hey, Anthony, do you mind if I just try and experiment with you, please, mate? I'm just going to try bring them on camera, and I'm just going to see what happens when I touch this button. You don't have to. Can you hear me, mate? Maybe, yeah, connecting. Hi, Anthony, how you going?
All right, mate.
Oh, where are you calling from, mate?
Dublin.
Dublin? Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That orientation.
I pressed the wrong button.
No, that's okay, mate. Hey, look, I just wanted to see what happened when I tested that, right? You.
Oh, yeah, no, it's cool, mate.
Good on you, mate. You stay safe. We'll talk to you later on, eh? I'm just going to clear you off. So.
No bother.
Thanks, mate. I really
Cheers,
appreciate
mate.
your time, mate. Nice to meet you, Anthony.
No bother. See you later.
And Darbs, great to see you. And Keith. I don't know if you know Anthony, Keith. He's a fellow Dubliner, or fellow Irishman, I should say. And we'll just pop that back. Now, that was an experiment and a half. Hadn't done that before, but now I know what happens. Now, it doesn't come up for everybody, so I don't know what sort of phone you're using, Anthony. Whether it's a different type of phone or an iPhone there, or something that's allowing you to come on camera. Same with you, Darbs. What sort of camera are you using, or phone are you using to actually come through? Because I'm looking at Keith. Keith, are you on a laptop, mate? Maybe that's the difference. Some people on laptops, some people aren't. Matthew, how you going, mate? Nice to meet you. Where are you calling from, Matthew? And I'm just going to let that scroll through. Just a few of you coming through. Today, it's going to be about flesh. It's going to be about soul, getting soul and personality in your figures. Got a little bit of the script that I'm going to start working through. A couple more people, just waiting for them to join on, and we'll see how we're going. You do indeed know Anthony. Good to hear, mate. Fantastic. And Nat, good to see you on board. And Mario, hello. A50 phone. Is that a Samsung, mate? I'm thinking that maybe that is the difference. It's a difference between being on a mobile device versus being on a laptop. On a Huawei. Okay, all right, I'm getting you, mate. Good to hear. Now, I don't know why that is on a Huawei. Why you can't have that bring them on camera scene thing going on. Interesting. Now, I'm going to look at using that a little bit more as we go on a little bit later on. One more person, and we should be kicking into this properly. Yeah, good to be here as well. Kev, really enjoying it, mate. And Anthony, thanks for that early introduction, getting you on board, mate. Okay, just one more person to join, I think. I'm waiting for my friend out in New York City. Takes him a little while. Hopefully, I got the time right, and he doesn't join an hour later, but we'll just wait and see. Okay. Matthew, St Helens. Yeah, I know Liverpool well. The missus is a Scouse mate from back in time, and still got family there in and around Hunts Cross. So yeah, know it well, and know the rugby league team vaguely. Nice to have you on board, Matthew. Righto, time ticking through. Good to have a few more comments coming through here today, team, as well. This is presented, of course, today by the sponsors product. Not so much today, Young's Minutes, but certainly the work they've been doing with Young's and Tommy's. Thought I'd throw a little bit of an advert for those guys at this time. Righto, let's get into it, eh? John, good to see you, mate. and got a good bunch on board. Right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get straight into it now. What I want to do, 3 things today. We're going to look back at where we've come from, what I've sort of learned from this experiment. Today we're going to look at this little topic I come up with around flesh and soul. So it's not just enough to think about how you paint flesh, but it's about how you create soul, how you add personality into your figures. Now, look, I don't know, I got a few tips that I'm thinking through that help me, and we'll share those, right? And then the last bit, I'll just do a little bit of a closeout for today's session, bit of a wrap, and then we'll get ready for tomorrow's. Now, tomorrow's session we'll talk about later on, but for now, I'm hoping that you're enjoying this new layout I've got. I've got it on a stand. It's still portrait view, so it's still that letterbox view, unfortunately. I've been testing out this morning with the widescreen, and I just can't guarantee that that's going to land on Facebook in the right orientation, so I'm not going to be using that. Bonjour, Michelle. Hello. What I'm going to first do, I just want to go through a few acknowledgements. So this is my 5th session. I've started to pop these onto YouTube as well, just a little bit of posterity. And I've sort of set a goal for myself to put together 10 videos. So come the end of this month, that would have been the COVID pack. You know, got to thank COVID and coronavirus for it giving me the time to spend learning and doing this, in all fairness. In terms of this, the first couple were just introductory, me sort of scrabbling around, and one of them was just doing the thing that I'm sort of known a little bit for, is that texturing. Very popular, those couple of videos, the second one particularly. So I'll be coming back to texturing. I'll look at that in probably next weekend session. So there'll be 7 and 8, we'll be looking at uniforms and texturing. Having said that, I want to do a call out to an online mate, James Rice. James from the States, incredibly impressed by your latest little Lewis Gunner bus, mate. The quality of texturing you've got on that greatcoat and the jerkin really blew me away. That's exactly the same sort of thing that I'm always striving to achieve, and I really did like that. So good on you, James. Thanks. Word goes out to you, mate. This week's Mike the Kiwi, inspirational World War I subject. And good to see you, Rob. Fantastic. Now, in addition to, so that first session, that's what that was around. The second, the 3rd and 4th sessions, correction, slow myself up, were around the wet palette. I was surprised, and what I learned during that session was the amount of stuff that we take for granted that people aren't aware of or aren't clear on. So we'll talk a little bit more about those sorts of things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my practical here to sort of prompt me to think through some of the stuff that I'm doing, and it may or may not be something that's new to you. Could well just be telling to suck eggs, as we say, which is something you already know, or it could be something that's, oh, I hadn't thought about that you want to ask questions about, and feel free to do that, right? Good call out, Keith. Yep, James' bus was outstanding. And this these 2 today and tomorrow are going to be focusing on what I call flesh and soul. All right, so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some work that I'm doing on Andy's figure. Some of you have seen him online. All right, this little guy, Uncle, as I like to call him, and that's a key point that I'll mention. With his glasses, I'm going to be starting a little bit work on his hands today, just to give you a feel of the color mix. I decided on a palette. We talked about at the end of last session around the range of colors that you can use. I've chosen some colors for this one. I'm going to share you that palette, and I'm going to start painting his hands just to prompt me to think about the sorts of things that I go through in my mind in terms of where we're going on the stuff. Okay, I think that's enough of the intro. Hang on, a bit clumsy there. Okay, I've got a bit of a mobile. I'm going to move on to the bench in a minute. I do also want to call out a couple of mates, which I should have said hi to in an earlier session. I've got a couple of Kiwi friends that deserve a mention. There's my neighbour Richard, who former neighbour, I should say. Richard, mad keen BSA motorbike rider, was really privileged to paint a couple of his BSA badges to go on the side of a restoration that he was doing. British Small Arms motorbike, or the factory that made those, BSA, British Small Arms. So that was really cool, Rich. Look forward to catching up with you and having a beer or a Guinness once we get back into the real world. which for New Zealand could actually happen later this week. We're still holding breath on that. And the other person I want to do a call out to is a mate, Les, who's down the South Island. I live in the North Island. New Zealand's got 3 islands, novelly called North and South and Stewart. Okay, I think, yeah, there's a whole story of that, I'm sure. Anyway, Les lives in the South Island. He's a good mate of mine, works in the dairy industry as I do from time to time as well. So good call out to you, Les. Trust you get a chance to see this, mate, if you're not on shift today. Okay, let's do a quick run through in terms of who's on the call today, catch up with a couple of people I've got, and then we'll get into the next stage of the session, which will be looking at flesh and soul, the personality that I'm trying to create with each of my pieces, and maybe it's something for you to think about just in terms of what you're trying to do with yours. Okay. Cousin Elspeth, how you going, Ellie? Craig, great to have you on board again, mate. And Joe Harris, goodness me, been a while. Okay, how you going, Joe? Good to see you. That man of yours is not at work today, I trust. Okay, Rob, we've already called out in Las Vegas. Rob, I did a little bit of experiment before just in terms of bringing people onto camera. And hey, look, I'd be really keen to do that at a future stage, mate. Might reach out to say hi to you on that one. And Carlos, hola. Steve, man, good to have you back on board, mate. Hi, Steve. Spencer, inspiring as well, mate. Been going through a couple of your back issues in terms of flies, correction, in terms of how to put these things together. Really do like your setup. It's a little bit more organised than mine, and I do value that sort of preamble and the work that you go through to explain the pieces that you've been working on. And it's fabulous to see that retrospective that you're doing at the moment. Okay. I'm going very well, thanks, Spencer. Really enjoying this little process today. Birmingham Small Arms. I thought it was British, mate. Okay, Birmingham. I'll be corrected, Steve. Thanks very much. Marcus, good to have you on board, mate. We're getting into the session properly now. Edgar, I'll do a sponsors product for you one day, mate, for sure. Definitely great to hear you and great to see you come in from Latvia. Do hope things are going well there, man. You know, I know she's a tough world out there. Doug, nice to have you on board. Where are you from, Doug? And Michael Scarborough finally made it, mate. Took a little while. I wasn't worried about the timing, but you've got there. And yes, you are late, but it's okay. Penelope Cruz, I'm sure, mate. Okay, Max V, welcome on board. Marcus, no problem, mate. Look, I've done a bit of a preamble for those that weren't able to get here on time. Look, it's a flexible session. You can always watch it later. Timing's not the important thing, other than me over talking. Phil O'Reilly, goodness me. Who would have thought some of these old workmates are suddenly popping up and coming in through here, right? Great to see you, Phil. Trust she's good in the bay, mate, and your family are all safe and well. And he got it. Montana, good to see you, Doug. I hope it's safe there, mate. I think you guys are doing okay. I know she's a bit tougher in other parts of the place, but look, I'm thinking of you, man. And Craig, fabulous to see you on board, mate. Again, really inspired by the work that you're doing. Love that pillbox and just love what you're planning there. Not to mention what you're trying to do with that little concrete bunker that you've got coming on. Pat, good to have you, mate. Max, watching the episode and watching at the same time. Good stuff. Danielle, I'm not too sure. Danielle, hola? Lassie? Where are you from, Danielle? Edgar, one for sure for the videos are getting better and better. That's what I'm trying to do, Edgar, get a little bit better. I mean, not the picture sharp, you have light. Yes, I've got light. These videos aren't intended to show you the quality of painting, which is, I think it's going to be useful just to talk that through. Now, I'm going to say, again, just finish off with Doug and Craig. Anybody else that joins after this, can you just tell them? I'll catch up with them a little bit later on, because we are going to start focusing now on flesh and soul. And this is my friend John Belcher, a great inspiration as part of that. All of the work that we'll be doing, and love swapping stories with John in terms of how we're going. Hey, John, look, I want to try you something, mate. Just try this. I'm going to try and bring you on, and I just want you to say hi to the crowd, if that's all right, mate. Just wait a minute. I'm going to hit the bring them on camera, just add you. John, can you just say hi and quickly introduce yourself if you come through there, mate? It'd be really magic to see you come on screen. It's coming. We're waiting. Did your hobby zone part come, Mike? No, mate, I didn't know anything about Hobby Zone Park. I'm certainly waiting for a stand to come. I've borrowed the missus stand. You guys wouldn't believe the way I've got this set up, right? I've got the old iPhone. I've got a blue tack to a stand that the missus bought, right, for iPad. It doesn't actually fit, so it is blue tack. But look, Steve, I've got a safety feature on it. I've got a big red rubber band holding the phone on, and I trust that only I can see that red rubber band. Okay. Hi, Curtis. John, did that come through, mate? I'm not too sure. It didn't seem to be working. Well, we'll try that another time, mate. Let's leave that for now. We'll come back on because I do want to get on to this sort of latest topic. And Matt, great to see you, man. Hopefully it's a beautiful day in LA today. And Barry King, goes back. Fabulous, Barry. Really appreciate it. I remember meeting you back in Chicago in 2002. It's a long time ago, mate. Always been an inspiration. That trip to Chicago was one of the most important milestones of my life about modelling, and getting a little bit of feedback from the likes of yourself and Bill Horan and others at that session. Not to mention, yeah, we can name drop a few others later on. Hi, Everton. How you go, mate? I'm thinking it's a Andre. Maybe it's an Ola. I'm not too sure, Everton, where you're from. Hopefully that works for you. Righto, so team, we've just done the preamble, a little bit of introduction. Potentially a bit longer than needed to. However, got a magic number, 20 odd watching live at the moment, which for me is pretty special. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking this flesh and soul thing. And during the week, I was a little bit vexed around what would I cover off? How would I cover off? Where am I going on this? So this session and the one tomorrow about references will be connecting into this visual storytelling, as some of these things have on Facebook, visual storyteller. I thought about the topic of not just flesh painting. Look, to be honest, there's a mountain of stuff out there with flesh painting, all right? And I think we'll talk a little bit more about going on. You know, an outstanding video from a mate, Yomi Ortiz Fawns. Apologies if I can't pronounce that right. I'm going to learn one day when I meet you, mate. Jaume Ortiz Fawns. Absolute master. Been an inspiration for me for many, many years. Jaume just released a video this week under the Vallejo paint brand. Acrylicos, Vallejo. I know it's mirrored, but you guys get it, the AV. Painting faces, right? So he paints a little Real Torre 54mm Highlander. If you haven't seen it, get online, have a look at it. It's a really good video about the quality of actually painting. And he's using a size 1, right? So let me just see. He's using a brush that size. Okay. For the entire, oops, no, it's a 10-1. Just come back. He's using that one. All right, a size 1, about that size, and he's using that for the entire face. Now, what's really interesting when you watch that video, you see this sort of detail. It takes a little while to sort of see it evolving, but you can see the point of the brush isn't actually pure all the time. He sent me some photos in terms of video setup, so I'm going to look at some of that high quality stuff a little bit later on. Probably the sort of thing that I'll whack in on the Patreon. But I just wanted to use that as an example of the sorts of videos that are online. And I watched another by, you know, Anthony Keith, might know the Irishman that puts together some of the flesh painting videos or painting videos. He did one on painting 1/35th scale heads with AK acrylics this morning that I was watching. And what I realized looking at that stuff, they've got all that stuff. We've got books. We'll have a look at that tomorrow, some of the references and materials available. There's just no shortage of information about how to paint flesh and faces, surely. Okay, there's got to be videos out there. There's got to be articles. You go to forums like Planet Figure. Every modeler talks about it. So what's going to be different about what I do today that you haven't already seen before? Unless you're brand new at it, you probably already know some of this stuff. So what I did realize is, you know, I just joined Reddit. My son got me into that yesterday. And one of the questions that came up this morning was this. One of the chaps that replied to me just said he'd like some help on his 1/35th scale faces. And the issue is they seem to come out always too pinky. Now, I'm not too sure. You know, some people's complexion is pinky. You know, mine's sort of you've been a little bit, probably a little bit red after hot shower, a little bit flush, blood pressure, that sort of thing. Faces are all different. And so for some people, pinky might be spot on. For others, that sort of, I don't know, duller, tannier, creamier, browner complexion could be more appropriate. And I think that's the sort of thing that we've got to have a talk about, right? Now, I'm going to do a quick scan through just to sort of see what's coming through, what people are asking. Barry's there, Matt, yeah. Alexei, hello. Hello. It's going to take you 30 minutes to say hi to everyone. Yeah, I know, mate. I know, Steve. I've got to get on with it, right? Hola, Juan, Juan. Spanish names really get me. I've got to learn how to do that. I've got a friend who's Spanish and down. Great to, yeah, Kev, agree with you. Jummy's video is spot on. And we're still going. Nephew John, good to see you, mate. Righto. So I've already talked about Jimmy's video. I've already talked about the fact that there's a lot of stuff out there, okay? A lot of reference material. The other thing that came out this week, special mention again, if you haven't got it. So, you know, in the course of 1 week, 2 fabulous flesh painting references come through. The first was Jimmy's video for acrylics, Villaggio. The second one was out of Darren Parker Mead, my mate at Tommy's, with Alex Long. So Alex is the painting of a lot of the box art figures now for Darren. They put together a fabulous little brochure, half a dozen pages, downloadable PDF. Alex has got step-by-step photos, explains the whole list. Look, if you haven't got it, get it. And again, I'm saying there's just no shortage of information out there. So what's the difference between painting flesh and adding soul? What do you reckon it is? What's the reference? Mark Bannister, hello Mark. My brushes, mate, mostly come from Gordon Harris or friends that have sent them to me. Okay, Gordon Harris, shop in Hamilton, we can mail order. There's another little mail order company, Art Supplies New Zealand, and Lincraft, just found this week. And Dave Maddox, man, so neat to have you back in the frame, Dave. Always loved your pilots. Love having and seeing you back in painting again. And Mike, great series, watch from the UK, good to hear you, man. And Pete Scott, hello. So look, guys, for those that just joined us, we're talking about the difference between painting flesh, which you can download a PDF on, you can watch endless videos, which are good, all right, and you can actually get a pilot box, which we'll talk a little bit more about those references tomorrow. The challenge for me, though, is it's just not good enough to watch, read, you got to do, okay? And so in terms of turning soul, number 1 tip, give your project a name, okay? Number 1 tip, give your project a name, all right? It's not just a Stug or a Tommy or a Tiger or a Panther or a Sherman, okay? Or a Napoleonic figure. Give it a name, give it a personality immediately. Try and identify it to somebody. So this little guy goes with the little guy I just did last week, which was the little sleeping Tommy, which I called Jimmy. So Jimmy is out of a movie called Journey's End. It's one of the most filmed and talked about and shared stories of the First World War, based around a specific unit. It was written by one of the young officers that was in that unit. Fabulous story online. If you get a chance, have a look at Sheriff. You can't help but have a look at the portrait, the photo of him, to really get a feel for it. And this guy is another character in that movie called Uncle. Now, Uncle was a school teacher, an older member of the unit. Sort of Jimmy was very young. Uncle was older. He's a school teacher, as I already said. And he's talked in the movie about a scene where he's got a couple of kids at home. He just returned. He spent most of his trip home not going to shows, which he was asked by one of the teams, but spending time in the garden with his wife and his sons. Now, I'm not going to give you a spoiler on that one, and that's a poignant moment in the movie. So you can see as I'm talking through that, I'm thinking through that, I'm immediately trying to imbue some sort of character into this little piece of resin, the size of my small finger, for those that don't know, right? That head, the size of a pea. In fact, it's smaller than a pea. And what I'm trying to do is put that character in. And I think that's part of the recipe to try and create some soul into your figures. Okay, just to start. Okay, thoughts on that one? I don't know. I just wanted to move away from a standard flesh to the soul. Righto. So I did talk about wet pellets, and this is the wet pellet that I created. Now I'm just swinging around. You're going to lose me. I'm going to swing around. Omar, hello. Great to see you. And Gerard, welcome. And Dave Oils, good to see you. Fury, welcome on board. I'm just swinging around to the pallet here. Now, what I'm going to do, team, most of this next bit, I trust you're going to be able to hear me okay. I can itch my nose, it's a bit of a pain. Dave, you're spot on, mate. Telling a story is what we're all about. So here's our little guy, okay, Uncle. So he's a middle-aged officer, maybe in his mid-30s, you know, this bit of that's old back in those times, given the life expectancy. So Uncle here. Now I decided on a bit of a palette. Now I talked through. I've got my paints laid out here. Right. I've got them laid out. Now I wouldn't normally have them all laid out here, but I've laid them out for you guys specifically, just to sort of make sure that you've got that and we can talk them through. Right. So I've got them all laid out, and I'm just going to work my way through. So to share that bit of a palette with you. So I decided with Uncle, I wanted him to have a warmer hue. Jimmy's new. He's a little bit fresh-faced. His complexion's a lot lighter in terms of what I did. So I wanted to bring a little bit more extra color to Uncle's face. So what I've put on the palette here, these first couple, I did put you wrong last week on the eyes. For those who watched last week's video, it's actually Vallejo Light Flesh. You're not going to be able to read the label very well, but it's number 928 or 006 or Garnet Claret, but it's the lightest flesh that they have, and it almost comes out white, and it's just tucked in there, and that's what you start with the eyes. All right, let me just get this, yep, there. A little bit there, a little bit dried up on the old wet palette. This is the same wet palette that I made in the video last week. Not really happy with it, however, I wanted to keep at it with this project so I could share it with you guys today. So on it, I've got beige red. Okay, that's my prime base color, and that goes another call out to me mate John Belcher for putting me on. I think one of the things you've got to do is you've got to grab a base color that you're comfortable with. Now, interesting enough, watching the video by the Irishman this morning, I did notice he worked from dark to light. So what he did is he started with a darker base. I don't do that. I tend to choose a base color that's mid-range. So that's the primary part of the face. The base color is the mid-range. I'm using beige rose for that. And I'm working up on, in terms of this one, lights, darks, I'm backwards and forwards as I'm painting. So it's not that systematic. I think the colors are more important. So to lighten them, give them a bit of personality, I've got Naples Yellow, Joe Sonia. I've got Netfall Red Light. For those who haven't got Joe Sonia, you can get these little starter packs. Let me just put that up there, put that down for a second. You've got the big tube, you've got the small tube, so you're talking, they should have a size on them. I don't know. These are bigger, these are smaller, right? You get, you get a lifetime of painting just out of one of these tubes. You get half a lifetime just out of these small tubes, right? But you get a little sample of primary colors. So Netfall Red Light is, and I've got a fair bit on there, but I think that's an important part. In the set that was being explained this morning, they call it cheek glaze. I tend to mix that quite a bit into the flesh throughout, particularly for under and tip of nose, red for the ears, definitely bring a lot of red into the ears, and sometimes a little bit of red just coming into around the eyes, and perhaps just on the just below the jaw, below the ears, on the neckline. So I've got that there. I've got burnt sienna, and I've got sap green. Now I think this is the tip I'm going to give you today. Apart from giving your figure a name, look at some unconventional colors and look at bringing some green into your palette. Okay, I think the green makes a difference because it just tends to cut a little bit of that pinkness out, but it also gives a more sallow tone. Now I didn't invent that one, I think master painters like Manjin and Darren Hahn, that's a colour that they always brought in. I'm using different shades of that, but what I'm finding, I'm really happy with the way that sap green can blend with burnt sienna and just mix with a little bit of this red light, a little bit of Naples yellow. You can actually get a nice tanny colour. I could actually probably do a base just out of those four: Naples yellow, the red light, the burnt sienna, and the sap green. A little bit lazy, that's why I always go with that base to sort of the base of the red beige to get it started with. Okay, now coming back around the palette, so if that's the lighter tones, there's a bit of shadow coming in here. I've got some really dark shadow coming into some burnt umber, Joe Sonia, Payne's Grey. I talked about that last week as a go-to on my palette. And yes, I have got some carbon black. So credit to carbon black. I didn't know why I was using it. Okay, I didn't know why I was using that carbon black, but hey, call out to Jamie. That's what how I pronounce it in that acrylics video. That's what it's for, mate. It's for showing contrast. So once you paint your face, and he showed a beautiful example of that, the face is sort of, I don't know, it's looking a little bit bland, but you wax some black around the edges of it, as I did for the photos that I took last night of this little guy. Black under collar, helmet. Go back, have a look at those photos, and you'll notice that you start to focus more on what's happening in that face because you've got a border to it. If you don't have that, you don't have a border. Now, I don't tend to use an undercoat, but if I do, it's typically a black because it's the base of what I do with my texturing and uniforms. And I'm going to be looking at uniforms next week. Righto. Okay. Now, I have been experimenting this morning with trying to get a good view of what I'm doing here. Okay. Been trying to get a good view, and it's just not working for me, to be honest. Old video, old glasses off, 3.5 mags on. Okay. And yes, I'm going to be doing a little bit, but what I'm doing is focusing on the face. Move from the face. I'm happy with that. I've just got to do I've got the glasses. I'm going to be looking at his hands. I'm going to be doing, I don't know, 5-10 minutes just sort of weaving away on those hands. The hands realistically will probably take me, I don't know, 45 an hour each type thing, but I'm happy with them. Who knows? Maybe a little bit less of a, depending on it. But these are quite nice hands, and they're an important part of the story that this is telling. Uncle's reading a map, hence the glasses and the map. So that whole thought process in terms of getting the soul, there's a story about what he's doing and why he's doing it, why he's dressed the way he is. Okay? I'm going to call out to my mate Andy in terms of that process, in terms of that. I also wanted to bring a little bit something special to him, and with all of my figures, I'm always trying to lift them away from what others are doing. I want them to be unique to me. All right. So I'm going to do a little bit of painting here. Now, what I've done is I've base coated with the beige red. All right. And beige red is, we went through this one last week, but let's try it again. The big numbers on beige red is 70.804. Okay. The little numbers 036, and then there's some federal standard and RAL numbers. Okay, so 804 beige red. Now I've base coated that. Now, one of the things I've noticed, and this is a point I asked Jeremy, these are quite shiny. They're almost glossy as hands, and I'm not happy with those. Right? I don't like gloss unless it is supposed to be gloss. So typically, gloss comes into things like polished boots, leather, okay, and glass. Those are different stages of gloss. When I use semi-gloss, that is on face and features. You can see on my face at the moment with the light, there's a bit of a sheen to it. That's the sort of thing that I'm trying to get onto the flesh. So just enough sheen for you to notice and not notice. It's not always clear in photos. However, I think that's a tip. You've got to actually have a bit of satin, a bit of a sheen when you're working on face. I think that also adds soul, because what it does is what you're trying to do is you're trying to replicate the thing that we're familiar with most when we see people. All right. And a healthy person tends to have bright skin. They tend to have quite shiny skin. Depending on your complexion, you can see that sheen more often. and it's different from their clothing. Okay, so why wouldn't you add sheen? Remember, you're not just painting flesh, you're trying to replicate what we see naturally. And I think that's part of creating soul. All right, let's carry on a little bit more. Trust that was a helpful bit. Let's move on. Righto. For Steve, I know you're desperate to see me dipping the paint brush in, right? So water, a little bit of a clean of the brush, make sure she's set. Now I've got my glaze medium, okay, Vallejo glaze medium in there. I've got a few spots on. I've actually got, I did a bit of a refresh on this palette last night, so there's probably more moisture than I need in there. 1 drop of glaze medium. I will use that as the primary thinning material for all my paints throughout the session, and I'll just keep topping that up as I go. Mica varnish, it's actually just Vallejo satin varnish, and remember I talked about sheen, the importance of that. That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to have a drop of this into it. Okay, just 1 drop. Now, in both those cases, I'm mentally making a note which is which. It is possible to mix them up, and I've done it in the past. I think the critical thing here is to make sure that you've got a fresh lot of those when you come into the painting session. If you don't have your fresh mediums, what can happen is they get gritty, they get a bit sticky, and with the finesse of acrylics, what you'll find is they just get clumsy. They get a little bit cluttered. When you're working on flesh, you want that smooth, slight sheen. When you're working on uniforms, that's perfect. You can actually build and play with that texturing that you're getting, but you don't want to get that crumbly effect. You don't want to get that thickening on your wet palette. So another tip there, just start with a fresh drop of your medium and your varnish when you're starting. The medium lasts for ages. It will start to dissipate into that wet palette. The varnish probably has a shorter lifespan, so it's probably an hour or two. It'll stay there, and then it'll start to seep in and get a little bit gluey, a bit sticky. Okay. So all I want to do here is I just want to show you a little bit in action, because like I said, it's no good just talking about it, reading about it. You've got to do it. So what I'm going to start with, I've done that base coat. Now, really, what I want to do is I just want to get some darker shadow in there. So yeah, I suppose it is a bit of dark. Start dark, work to light. I'm going to start with a bit of shadow, and the shadow is going to be a little bit burnt sienna, a little bit of sap green. Okay. And I'm going to be a little bit quiet as I concentrate here a bit. And I can immediately tell this is a bit of a more sallow colour. And what I'm getting is probably it's almost a greyish tone actually. Greeny brown greyish tone. I'm going to put this on the undersides of the hands, and what I immediately notice is there's too much green in it. It's too yellowy. So I'm going to kill that a little bit. I'm going to whack a little bit of base red in, or beige red. Makes it more grey. And it's actually a very khaki colour, in fact, which I'm not going to be wanting because that's from my face. Just a little bit of glazing medium just to move it around. A little bit more burnt sienna. Just working my way through there. Now the joy of acrylics is it doesn't matter if it doesn't come out right when you first put it on. And what I'm doing is it's reasonably deliberate. Lower side of the palm, between the fingers. And I'm looking at the areas where the darkest tones will be. Now this will just be a base as well. And I've noticed always have a scalpel on hand. Always have a scalpel on hand. I've got the brush in there. Let's just come back a little bit. scalpel on hand to remove tiny specks of dust, grit, brush material. This is a sharp one. Bit like taking a thistle out of your foot. Just sort of leverage it out. And when you've got it, you're good to go. Now I'm actually, I'm on the inside of these hands. They're going to be much darker. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber, which is a much darker tone, with a little bit. I've missed this colour actually. I've got Dimension Red, Vallejo Red, which I've also got on the palette next to those eyes. Now this is not a, this is a darker shade of red. It's more of a cadmium umber red, which I tend to use, but it's a darker tone, so it's more cold. And I'm using that specifically to come in with the burnt umber, just to provide a little bit of deeper shadow. Now all you should be thinking about here is the amount of times I'm brushing. Just clean a little bit of paint, a little bit of grit, a little spout on the nail there. Just taking that off. I'm watching every single stroke here and just feeling my way into the hand. And just using that tone that I'm liking there. A little bit of red, a little bit of burnt umber. So you remember I've still got that sap green on the brush as well. So that's already blended on the brush too. I'm quite pleased actually. That's sort of got the sort of tone that I wanted. Quite a dark colour between the fingers. Tip: you do not use black to indicate the separation of fingers or parts of the face. Typically, look at a dark tone that allows that, infers that without that depth of shade, right? Now you'll see the final version of this later on. You're not going to see the detail of it on here. I should point out that the base coat I put on here was probably 3 or 4 very thin layers of that beige red, just to make sure I got a uniform tone. Some people like to airbrush. I don't airbrush, unfortunately. Certainly not at the moment. Never say never. And I've just worked the darkest tones in there. Now, you're not going to see how dark these tones are, but I'm not really comfortable with the khaki-ish on the lower side of this hand. However, it's dark enough for me to use as a base, because as I start mixing up my lighter tones, and the lighter tones I'm going to use, I'm using a mix of this Naples yellow, a dash of this burnt sienna and sap green mix, and just a little tiny bit of this red light. And that does actually create a pinky tone, but it's okay because it's going to go onto a darker surface, and it's probably a little bit more grey yellow, not so pinky as such when it actually goes on. And that's that point about the black. You're actually using different colours. The colours around it and the base that you go onto all make a difference. And so when you're watching those videos online, have a look at the colours that have gone underneath, as well as the colours that have gone over the top, as well as the background colour that's been used. If you look in the photo that I posted, I've got a black background and I've got a light bluey grey background for the figure. And they look quite different depending on the background colour that you're using. Exactly the same with when you're painting flesh, or in this case adding soul. So I'm actually looking at my hands as I'm painting Uncle's hands to see if I can replicate what I'm actually seeing here. Now, sure, it might be 35 times smaller than my hand, or 32 times smaller, but that's what you're trying to do. That's actually what you're trying to do in terms of get that soul. I'm going to call it time in a minute. What I'm going to do is a quick scan through who was on the call, any other points you've got, and do feel free to come back to me with anything specific. Let's just do a final call out to everybody that took the time to join today. Righto. Joseph, nice to have you on board, mate. Thank you for joining us. Sergey, hello. Dave saying hi, yeah, to John. Mario, nice to see you too, mate, and great to see you with Masked Up, mate. Fantastic. Trust things are okay with where you are. Thinking of you. She's a pretty tough time out there, and just hoping that we'll all come through this better on the other side, mate. Catch you later. Anthony had to go, but we'll pick up later on. Bryce, good to see you, mate. Trust it's safe at work. Look forward to seeing you at some stage in the future. Alexander, nice to see you. Do you use the satin in the mix? I actually mix it into the paint as I'm going, Nap. That's an important point. I mix the glazing medium and the satin varnish into the paint as I'm working it. I use that as a medium for painting with, right? Which is easier than taking a thistle out of your backside. Oh, stop it, mate. You're distracting me. Hola, Alejandro. Good to see you, Munro. Just finishing up, mate. Just wrapping this one up for the day. Hello, Bill. Bonjour. Thanks, John. And great to have you on board, Andrew, as we come through. John, sorry I missed you, mate. We're just sort of, I'm not too sure what time you joined, but hopefully this is useful. Go back and have a look at the replay of it. Had like 2,500 views on the videos I've done to date. So, you know, people seem to be getting as much value as reviewing them as they do later on. Rob, you enjoyed that one. Good on you, mate. Craig, hopefully it was useful. Like to see you, mate. Yep. Thanks. Fantastic to see what you're putting together. Now, guys, just in terms of tomorrow's session, tomorrow, a bit more Q&A. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about references. And aim is it's a bit earlier in the morning. You know, that was a bit of a disaster last time. I'm going to get up, make sure I'm a bit more organised, readiness for it. For me, it's 7 o'clock on a Monday. For you guys overseas, I think it's 8 o'clock on a Sunday night in the UK, and I think it's 3 o'clock in New York City, but it's GMT minus 12 because we're like at the front end of the world here in New Zealand. It's certainly the front end of the time zone. And Phil, good to have you on board, mate. Thanks very much for your support on Patreon. It's really neat to have a few people invest in this. Phil, rest assured, as I said, mate, we're doing 10 of these videos on Facebook Live. That's sort of a part of it. And then I want to look in getting into a bit deeper in quality. But they'll all have this sort of part of the process. Omar, fabulous to see you again, mate. Really, I do remember that opportunity that we met in Aussie that a few years back. You guys take care, guys. Fantastic to see you all. And again, Mike the Kiwi, stay safe out there, keep your distance, and be kind. Bye for now.